Hey friends, you're watching BrainStormAcres. I'm Henry. I'm sitting in Irene's office right now. I've displaced her. She's doing something else for a little while. She very kindly let me use the office. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about what happened with our solar system, and I want to answer the question, is a $60 piece of electronics better than a $3,000 piece of electronics? I'm going to give you a quick update on my health issues. I got an infection in my knee, as you may have seen in an earlier show. It appears to have been a staph infection that I probably got when I had some dental work done. It was a simple cleaning, not a big deal, but I still ended up with an infection. So, that just means in the future I'm going to get a prescription for antibiotics before I have the dental procedure done. We got back home from the sales event that we did in southern Arizona last week. Well, not quite a week ago, actually. We just got back 4 or 5 days ago. And our solar system was not working. So I did what I would normally do. I went to start the generator, and I got power out from the generator, but the lights didn't go on in the house, and the lights didn't go on in the utility building, and the inverter charger combinations didn't turn on. So what happened? On the back of every piece of electronics that's built, at least most of them today, you'll find an AC input specification. Well, for the inverter charger that I have in the utility building, which is true for all inverter chargers, there is a lower voltage input that will actually have the electronics work. This charger takes 100 volts minimum. That's AC power from the line. But it can work until about 240 volts. That means you can plug into a normal outlet, household outlet, here in the US, or you could plug into a 240 volt system or lower voltage elsewhere in the world. You just need a different plug to go into the wall outlet. Well, this charge controller, which is exactly, hello Rufus, this charge controller does the same thing as the inverter charger that I have out in the utility building. But I have another set of charge controllers. So there's a charge controller in each inverter. There's another charge controller that connects each set of solar panels to the system. The charge controller in the inverter package uses AC from the line coming in, but it also controls all of the other charge controllers. That's used in order to not overcharge or undercharge batteries accidentally. So what happened? We left for the event on a Sunday morning. It was snowing. We knew it was going to snow for a little while. What we didn't know is that we were going to have at least 6 days of overcast skies. Now, we didn't have any loads running in the house, no washing machines, no washers, dryers, no lights, nothing. That was good. That means we'd use a small amount of energy out of the batteries that I have in the utility building. That's all well and fine, but what happened? We got back and there was still snow stuck on the bottom quarter of those solar panels. One of the problems with solar panels is a lot of them, depending on how they're connected, don't put out much power when they're partially blocked. Snow blocks some of the light. It doesn't completely block it, but it blocks enough. In this case, the snow that happened on Sunday when it was overcast kept the batteries from being charged. Modern electronics are generally speaking smart. That's good and that's bad. The good part is that systems will work together as long as it's within normal operating ranges. The bad part is when it fails, it can be tricky to get things to come back alive. You might have seen this if you have a smart TV and the power is interrupted. When you go to turn the smart TV on, it will take a little while for a picture to appear. And that's because there's an onboard computer on board the TV that is controlling the TV. So there's a lot of programming that goes on behind the scenes. Well, the same thing goes on with these inverter chargers that you buy to operate on a solar system. Is a $60 inverter better than a $3,000 inverter? Well, the answer to that is a qualified it depends. That $100 inverter that I bought is intended to be used in a car. So it normally accepts voltage from somewhere around 11 volts to something around 15 volts. And that converts it into AC power, and that's just grand. The interesting thing about that inverter is it will also operate a little lower and a little higher. That gives you some wiggle room in operating the system. That's very good. Well, what about my $3,000 inverter charger? Hello, Rufus. Rufus was outside inspecting the domain of his yard.
Rufus, come on.
You can go see Mommy?
Yeah, we're getting into trouble. Come on, let's go.
The $3,000 inverter charger, first of all, puts out a lot more power, and it will put it out continuously. That $100 inverter will put about 750 watts out, but not on a continuous basis. It really will only work about 400 or 500 watts. My big inverter charger will put out 3,000 watts continuously. It doesn't matter whether or not it's hot or cold outside, it will put out that amount of power, 3,000 watts, continuously. Why wouldn't the inverter turn on when I started the generator? Well, the battery voltage had dropped so low that the batteries shut themselves off. That's to protect the batteries from damage. If the battery voltage goes too low, it can damage the batteries, and you don't want to be damaging $10,000 worth of batteries or $5,000. You don't want to be damaging that amount of infrastructure. So the batteries shut themselves off. I checked the batteries to see if they would turn on, and one of them would. Not a whole lot, but it would turn on. It wasn't enough to restart the inverter. Why? This is a really technical thing. Bear with me for a minute while we do a deep dive into some geekdom. There is a capacitor in all of these inverters that has to be charged up. When you first connect a battery to that inverter, there's a large amount of current that has to flow into the capacitor to charge it up. There wasn't enough current, wasn't enough power left in that one battery to charge that capacitor up so the inverter would turn on. Why did I want the inverter to turn on? That's really simple. That inverter includes a charger in it that will charge the batteries as long as it's having a generator connected to the inverter. It was getting dark. The sun was already too low to really produce any amount of usable power, so I had to run the generator. Since I couldn't get the one battery to get the system to restart, I luckily had that third battery that I've been trying to get the voltages to match so I could put it online. And boy, am I glad I did. I simply disconnected those other two batteries, connected the third battery, which is fully charged, restarted the system. It takes a little effort to do that. It's a complicated sequence depending upon the specific system you have in order to restart the system. I followed my instructions for all the parts that I have and restarted the inverter. The inverter restarted and voila, we had lights in the house, lights in the utility building, but I still needed to run the generator. I got the generator running and that worked just beautifully. The good thing is I happen to have had a battery. Well, what would I have done if I didn't have a third battery? Good question. Well, Irene had one answer. We have a 12-volt battery that we've just been using at our event. We had 60% of the battery left, which means we'd be able to recharge our phones. We could have a few lights. I had the big shop lights that have their own batteries. We'd be able to survive the night just fine and deal with it in the morning. But it's a lot easier to just go ahead and get it to start and get it running. What am I going to do now? Great question. First of all, we're going to hope that we don't have another 6-day outage of solar. It's not really an outage, it's just a lot of overcast skies and us not be here. The 3 batteries will let us run our home for about 3 days. Normally, when we're not here at least. Now normally that is just fine because typically we'll have enough sunlight even on overcast days to recharge the batteries to a level to where we can last until we have good solar days. We had to go. We had to go when weather is turning bad and it turned off. What am I going to do next time? First of all, I'm going to shut off the second inverter that I have in the system. I have a dual inverter system. One will operate the house when the power demand is 3,000 watts or less, and the second one will turn on when the power demand goes above 3,000 watts. I'm going to turn that second one off. Well, what happens? That's going to cut down the standby draw, which is 50 watts per inverter. 50 watts over 24 hours is about 600 watts. That's about 1/10 of one battery. Well, that's a big difference. What else will I do? If I don't have a need to actually check other things on at the house, I'm going to shut down the Starlink connection because there's 2 routers, there's a switch, there's the base station, there's a standby backup system, battery backup. All of those pieces draw power. So I'll shut that off. And that will reduce our power draw probably low enough that with 3 batteries we'll be able to last a week or more. If we're not home, but you know, in the summertime when we're running our irrigation, I'll have to adjust for some draw from the well pump. What can you do? Well, first of all, I don't recommend going fully off-grid if you don't need to. It's a lot of money, it has a lot of infrastructure, it takes a lot of skill and knowledge to really make this system work for you the way you want it to work. It's much better, in my opinion, if you have power nearby to hook up to the grid. Yeah, go ahead and keep your batteries and your inverters and all those other things for backup. Or take some loads off your house periodically and run it that way. Being fully off-grid is not easy. It's not for the faint of heart. It's not cheap. It's not easy. It's not simple. You could do it. Most of the time, we've only had this problem once in 18 years. That's it. Not bad for, about 7,000 days. That's pretty good. It was a real pain in the neck to come home and find it being out. What else are we going to do? I'm going to see if there's a way for me to reprogram the charge controllers in my inverter system to allow the external charge controllers to the solar panels to continue operating when the battery level gets low. I'm not sure there is, but that's the next step that I have to go research. And that's going to be some days of reading a lot of documentation and talking to vendors. Well, I hope that provides a little bit of an explanation about what happened, why it happened, how I get it working, and what I'll do in the future. Thanks very much for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications because we have a whole lot more going on. Irene's busy doing some paperwork right now. She'll be down in the studio later on. Yesterday I went down and picked up a new drill press for her shop. We'll do a video about some of her equipment in the not too distant future. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye.